Hi, my name is Shirley Jane Spar Greenberger. I was born in Omaha on August 16th, 1921 at 1808 North 21st Street, the intersection of 21st Street and Clark. I was the youngest of 6 children, 5 girls and 1 boy, and I was youngest by 6 years. And my mother always told me she was embarrassed when she was pregnant with me because she thought she was through having children. But I was everyone's baby, and actually, growing up, I was almost like an only child. My father was a very devout Orthodox Jew, and he came to this country early in the 19th century, about 1901 or 2, I would imagine, and my mother followed about 3 or 4 years later. My father worked as a painter when he first came here, and that's why he came to Omaha, because he had a friend here who had a job for him. He later became a Hebrew teacher. He was a Talmudic scholar in Russia before he came here. And he began teaching some of the young Jewish men in Omaha. Many of them grew up to be quite distinguished in the city. After a while, he actually built a little, when he moved to 21st and Clark Street, he built a little addition to the house that had a big schoolroom and 2 smaller ones, and had a Hebrew school there. Meanwhile, having this large family living in the front of the house, and the older girls, became kind of tomboys playing with the students. But after a while, it was just a little too difficult to have the school and the large family, and he gave that up, and he started to drive a horse and wagon for a bakery. He had a bakery route. And he was on his bakery route the day I was born. I think that the obstetrician who delivered me was Dr. Abe Greenberg. Dr. Scher had delivered all the other children, but he had retired by the time I came along.
Was your mother and father married before they came to
Yes,
this country?
they were married. They met, I think they met in Vilna. My mother was from Lithuania, and she was working in a stocking factory when she was a young girl. And I really don't know how they met, but he was in the service, and when they met, he was wearing a uniform, and she said she couldn't go on the street with him because it was not considered proper to be seen with someone in uniform, but she said he looked so handsome in his uniform. They were married, I think, when she was about 18 or 19, and they had a child, they had a son, and she was pregnant again when Russia went to war with China. And since he was in the reserves, he did not want to fight for Russia, so he came to America. While he was gone, my mother gave birth to a girl, and she was probably 20, 21 years old, and the children, there was a scarlet fever epidemic, and both children died. Here was my mother, this young woman without her husband, alone in Russia. And when he sent for her, she came across in steerage all by herself, and I marvel at the courage of these young people who came to this country, for a better life. And of course, as soon as she got here, they started a family, and my older sister was almost like a second mother to the rest of the family. And the day I was born, when she had to take all the other children away from the house, she had games for them, little jobs for them to do, prizes to give to them. She was that kind of person, my older sister Sophia. My earliest recollection is when my father bought a little grocery store that was catty corner on 21st and Clark from a man by the name of Mr. Weiner. And it was a little store that was connected to a house to the side and the back. And my father was not a businessman, but because he was very observant of the holidays, the major and minor, and then Shabbat, he had to be his own boss. And I think the earliest recollection I have of living there was one time during a storm. The sewers backed up, and our house was flooded, and I was carried to the alley up the street that was on a little higher ground. And I remember hearing stories about the piano in the living room floating, but I don't know if that's it was just a story.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about your mother and your dad specifically.
Okay, my mother was a very quiet, kind, lovely woman. She was beautiful, of course. All mothers are. My father had kind of a short fuse, and she was a wonderful, antidote to him, because she could deal with customers in the store that he couldn't. When he would make some of them angry about something he'd say, she would make things better. She was a wonderful seamstress, and one of the stories she tells, and my older sisters tell, is that Rose Blumpkin lived up the street from us, and she was an entrepreneur from the very first. And she would come down the street with the youngest child in the buggy, and she'd have bolts of cloth in the buggy, and she'd sell these bolts of cloth to the mothers in the neighborhood. And my mother would buy a bolt of, say, a plaid cotton, and she would make dresses and pajamas and shirts for my brother. And everybody in the family had the same thing, and the poor youngest sisters had to get the hand-me-downs from the older ones. So they were wearing that same plaid for years and years and years. But that was my earliest story that I heard about Rose Blumpkin, and later on, of course, when she had children and I was the age of a couple of hers, we were very good friends. My father, as I say, was a scholar. He studied every night after he closed the store. And at one time, when he finally saved enough money, he bought a copy of the Gomorrah. And he would argue with it every night after he closed the store. We could hear him in the living room discussing these issues. And whenever he would complete a book, they would have a celebration for him at his synagogue, which was the Beth Hamidrash on 19th and Burt, I think it was. And that's where they went every Shabbat. They went to the synagogue every Saturday, of course, on the high holy days, every holiday. And as we were not permitted to be inside, we would visit the women upstairs, but we weren't allowed to go down into the men's quarters.
Tell me about your sisters and your brother.
Oh, my oldest sister, Sophia, was... she turned out to be a very, very successful career woman, but she was an organizer. She organized the family. She and my sister Bess, who was Bess Brodkey, were just a year apart. And then after that came my sister Esther a couple years later, and then my brother Arthur, and then my sister Ray, and they were all within about 5 or 6 years of one another. And then 6 years after that, I was born. My older sisters all went to we all went to Kellam School. That was our school. By the time I got there were hardly any Jewish people enrolled. A lot of very nice black students. Some just white people, but very few Jewish people at that time. I had a couple of Jewish friends there. Then the older sisters went to a tech high school, and they all took either secretarial courses. My older sister Sophie took the sales course, and before she even graduated, she was working at Herzberg's, and on her graduation was given a job as a buyer of children's clothing. So 18 years old, she was going to New York to buy. And her whole career consisted of buying and merchandising. She was a crackerjack at it. My sister Bess graduated from Tech as a secretary, went to work. All during the Depression, they all had to work, and they all had to contribute to the household. My sister Esther went to work at the State Furniture Company, and that's where she met her future husband, Saul Gretz. My sister Bess was working downtown at the time and would come to pick up my sister Esther. At the time, one day when the son of one of the owners of the store was visiting, that was Morris Brodke, who at that time was a medical student, and they met and eventually became husband and wife. My sister Ray also worked at the State Furniture Company until she moved to California, where she is now residing. She got married there and lives there. My brother is the only one of us who got to go to college. He went to the University of Nebraska and was studying languages, all the Romance languages. He knows them all, in addition to Greek. And one summer when he was home, it was after my brother-in-law, Morris Brodke, had begun his medical practice. And he got a staph infection at the hospital, which became rheumatic fever. And for several months, he wasn't even able to drive. So he hired my brother to drive him to his hospital calls in the days when they made house calls to his patients. And it gave my brother an interest in medicine. And when he went back to school, he switched to pre-med and eventually went to the University of Nebraska Medical School, entered for 1 year at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles, and then was a fellow. Was on a fellowship at Mayos for 5 years, where he specialized in ear, nose, and throat. After that, he went to California and spent the rest of his professional life there. He's married, has 2 sons. One is a doctor, and he died November 4th of this year. My only brother.
Let's go back and talk about a holiday at the house.
Well, let's see. We'll talk about Friday night dinner. We always had Friday night dinner in the dining room, and as my sisters got married, they all came over for Friday night, and when they had children, they all came over. So it was kind of a festive occasion, Friday night dinner. They helped my mother prepare the meals. Everything was in Hebrew, so we didn't participate in the in the reading of the prayer book or anything. But we enjoyed the meals. It was always very good. My mother used to, and I would go with her to 24th Street, where the kosher butcher shops were and the fish markets, and I would go with her to get a live carp so she could make gefilte fish. And they would stun the fish, and it would still be flapping when we'd get it home. She would pick out a chicken, and they would defeather it for her, and she'd bring it home. And I used to watch her clean out a chicken. It was one of the joys of my young life. It was a lot of fun to watch. She would use this chicken to make chicken soup, which we always had on Friday night with matzo balls. And then she would serve the boiled chicken as the meal. And because I was the youngest, I always got the unborn eggs, which to this day I love the memory of it. I never see them anymore. I also got the white meat, which to this day I hate. It tasted like cardboard after being boiled into chicken. My early memories. Passover Seders were the same. They were big. My mother would invite people in the neighborhood who had nowhere else to go. And we always had a big table that would be stretched out, and my father would do all the reading. We had a couple of annual little jokes that we'd pull. One of them was the old Depression joke about the land rush in Florida, how the prices went up there when people went down to buy land in Florida, and how the prices were so high after a while. And the joke is, this man in Florida went into a grocery store, and I think he gave the grocer quite a large bill, and the man said, "What is this for?" He said, "I stepped on a grape coming in." And my father would laugh every year as though he had never heard it before. The other one was he would grate our own horseradish. He'd go out on the little back porch and grate the horseradish. Of course, his eyes would be brimming with tears. But during the meal, when it came time to eat some of the horseradish on the harosis, he would take a ball of it and put it in his mouth and then start reading very nonchalantly. And we would wait and tease him, waiting for the smoke to come out of his ears. It never did, of course, but his eyes would well up in tears again. We sang songs afterwards. That was our participation in it. We sang songs. And we did that until my parents moved out of that house, I guess. I can't remember when we stopped doing that.
What was that neighborhood like around 21st and Clark?
It was mostly, when I came along, it was mostly all Jewish. There was some black. When my sisters were small, it was almost all Jewish. And families that, they would mention families that I don't remember because I wasn't born then. But some of the families that I do, up the street was the Micklin family. They owned a big lumber company that many of the people in the neighborhood were employed at. They were the grandparents of Joan Micklin Silver. Okay, the Micklins also had a distant relative who lived next door to them in a very small, horrible house. And the relative was the wife of the family, and she was a raving lunatic. I mean, she screamed and yelled all the time. They had 3 sons. I don't know what happened to the 2 younger ones. The older one was not quite all there, and he was a very pleasant, benign person that the neighborhood all loved. The father of the family worked at the Micklin Lumber Company, and I would see him slogging home from work, so tired, and I used to feel so sorry for him. The Brooksteins lived at the end of that block. It was a big house, according to my young mind, and it was a 2-story house. They had a housekeeper. Mr. Brookstein was a tailor, and he would walk home from the streetcar line on 20th Street, always impeccably dressed with his beautifully combed white hair. He was such a grand man, such a wonderful man. They had twin sons, Izzy and Frank Brookstein, and I think they have a lot of family left in Omaha, I'm not sure. There was a Walk family when I was growing up that lived just a few doors from us, and it was kind of a star-crossed family. The father had tuberculosis. They had 2 sons, both died very, very young as children. They had 3 or 4 daughters, I'm not sure. One of them was my age, and I think all of the children died before their mother did, and I think she lived here at the Blumkin home until well along in her 90s. Outlived her whole family. That was that was a family that lived there during when I was there, young. Other families lived there before I was born. They're always asking me, do I remember the Shermans? No, I don't remember the Shermans. Or the Leons. I don't remember them. They were before my time. There was a family, the Shames family, that lived on the corner. I barely remember them. They had an automotive shop or something. Who are some of the others? The Resnick family lived right across the street from our store. It's old Mrs. Resnick, and had a son named Milton. And oddly enough, Milton's son works in the same business as one of my sons does in Chicago. Next to them was a family by the name of Zlotkin, Zlotkin. They had a couple sons and a couple of daughters. And then up the street from us, up 21st Street from us, there were several Jewish families. The Katz family, one of their daughters was Moni Zalkin, and she had a lot of family in Omaha. His family by the name of Bergman, and then a family by the name of Greenfield. I don't remember any of the other Jewish families on our street. There were a lot of them on 19th Street, where we always said, the richer Jewish people lived. Let's see, what else was there?
I'd like to hear you tell me about that house you lived in. About the rooms and so on.
Well, the house that I was born in, that my father built the Hebrew school behind, a very tiny house, and it had a living room that opened right off the front door. It was very cold, so they didn't go in there very often. And there was a dining room, a bedroom off the dining room, a kitchen, a bathroom off the kitchen. Then behind the kitchen was the large room with the two smaller rooms that were the school. But I don't remember any of that. I don't remember any of that at the time I was born or right after, of course. But what I do wonder is, where did everybody sleep? And I try to ask my sisters, and they don't remember either. Where did everybody sleep in that house? They must have had beds all over. I don't know. When my parents bought the store and the house across the street, they sold that house on contract to a family, and it was they didn't fulfill their contract, so eventually came back to us, which was good, because when the Federal Housing Authority decided to build a housing project just south of us, they wanted the property on our street, and so my parents sold that house at a pittance, I should say, to the government, and then built a little store in front of the house where I was born. And that's where I lived after, when I was a teenager. I lived in one of the back rooms. The house that we moved into, where the store was, you had the little store on one side, the house to the side and to the back. You could walk up 2 stairs from the store into the house, and the first room was a big dining room. The kitchen was off the dining room, but there was a front porch to the house that you could approach the living room from. They had the dining room, living room, kitchen, and bathroom on the first floor. Upstairs there were 3 bedrooms, and then a large area that you walked through to get to the rooms, which we used as a bedroom. And I remember before we had central heating, we had this big coal stove in the kitchen. Always had sweet potatoes baking in them. I love the aroma of sweet potatoes baking. They put a furnace in after a number of years, and we never had a lavatory in the bathroom until my brother put one in when he was just a young kid. We never had lights on Friday night, but my father devised a very clever way of turning off the light. We would have the lights on until 10 o'clock in the dining room, which is where we almost always congregated because it's the largest room. And he had a little table underneath the toggle switch, and he put an alarm clock on it and tied a string to the key that went around to turn off the alarm, and put the other end on the toggle, so that when the alarm went off at 10 o'clock, it would pull down the toggle switch. And I thought that was very ingenious of him to do that. That was our signal to go to bed. The kitchen always had an oil lamp burning, so we had light to go upstairs, a little bit of light to go upstairs. We almost did it by road to go to sleep. And what else can I tell you?
I want to hear about your high school years.
My high school years were not my happiest. I wanted to go to Central because the 1 or 2 Jewish friends I had were going to Central. And my father was adamant that I should go to Tech and take a secretarial course. And so I went to Tech. And I had no Jewish friends there, none at all. I had some nice Gentile friends. And because my sisters had all gone there and they were A+ students, I had a terrible act to follow, a really rough act to follow. Uh, my the teacher who taught calculus gave me an A plus at midterm, and I don't think I ever had 100 on a test. I mean, he learned after that I wasn't as bright as my sisters. But one incident that I've never forgotten as a freshman at Tech High School was, and I don't remember what the class was, but the teacher was a Miss McMillan, and it wasn't a civics class because I had a man teacher for that. It was another class. I don't know if they call it geography. I don't know what they called it. They didn't call it social studies or anything in those days. But she was telling us about a trip she made to South America. And here I am, this 12, 13-year-old kid. I don't know anything about the world. And she said she would go into these bazaars to buy things, and I would Jew them down. And that was the first time I'd ever heard that expression, and I just got the chills when I heard it. And I didn't know what to do about it. I was just too timid to make a fuss about it, and I never did. I didn't even tell my parents about it. But I remembered it. It's just one of those things you don't forget. I was at Tech for about a year and a half because I was a midterm student when I enrolled. And I pleaded with my father to let me go to Central High. I said, I want some Jewish friends. And finally he relented, and I went to Central High. And I did make some real good Jewish friends. I wasn't on the A-list because I didn't live where the A-list lived, but I was happy there. It was okay. And I graduated when I was 16. And I wasn't able to go to college. I worked for a while, but I was a seamstress. I was very gifted, if I can say so myself, very gifted seamstress. So I started sewing for people. I did that for a couple of years. I worked at Herzberg's for a little while, and I just felt I had no other skill but my sewing to. Because when I was at Tech High School taking the secretarial courses, I flunked typing. I mean, it was the only course I ever took that I couldn't really master to some degree. But I can type well today, but I couldn't then.
Who were some of your friends at Central High?
Bernice Robinson, she died quite young. I can't remember what her brother's name was. Mildred Berkowitz was a very good friend. Ruthie Somberg was a friend. Let's see, who else? I'm trying to think of some of the other. It's been a long time. I can't think of some of the other ones. But I dated. I had Jewish dates when I went to Central High. I can't think of their names either.
And then what did you do after graduation?
I started sewing for people, and I worked at Herzberg's for a while. I sewed. I made bridesmaids' dresses. At one time, I had so much work that I had to hire someone to help me do the handwork. I hired a very nice Jewish lady who came to my house and helped me do that. When I was 16, I went on a blind date with a boy from Grand Island. His name was Bernard Greenberger. And he was my brother-in-law's cousin, and also the cousin of one of my dear friends, Sarah Mae Gretz. And she asked me if I would go out with him. And she said he's cute. And I had heard that he was cute, so I said, okay. And he was cute. And we went to one of the high school subscription dances that night. We hit it off very well, and we started corresponding. And by that time, Sarah Mae had moved to Grand Island to live with an aunt, and so I went to visit her in June, and I got to know him better. He'd come to Omaha and visit. We corresponded back and forth, and he was really cute. I really liked him. But, I was 16 years old, and eventually I had another boyfriend, he had another girlfriend. We kind of lost track of each other. And then later on, in 1941, he was drafted, came to Omaha and called me. By that time, I had broken up with this boyfriend, and we started corresponding, and the rest, as they say, is history. I had a wonderful, wonderful 50-year marriage with Bernard Greenberger. He was a gentle man, funny man, a wonderful father, wonderful husband, and I have 4 sons to prove that.
Tell me about the wedding.
Oh my God. This was during the war, and he was a pilot. He went through flight training, and he was a heavy bomber pilot. And he was stationed in Sebring, Florida, before going overseas. And we wanted to get married before he went overseas. He really wasn't quite sure, but then he was. I wanted to get married before he went overseas, and then he did. And there was one day between Passover and Shavuot that marriages were permitted, and that was Lag BaOmer, I think it is. I think that's what it is. And so we decided that was the day we were going to get married. My mother wasn't able to travel at that time. She was, by then, she was almost totally blind with glaucoma. And Sister Bess and my mother-in-law, we took the train down to Sebring, Florida, which is where my husband was. He was stationed. We took the train to Tampa. My husband was stationed in Sebring. And meanwhile, before I left, when Rabbi Goldstein was at Bethel Synagogue, I asked him if he knew the name of a rabbi in Tampa, Florida. He said, "Oh, my brother-in-law is stationed there." He says, "Send him a letter and tell him you're coming. You'll have no problems." So I sent him a special delivery letter, told him that we needed a rabbi. We're coming down there to get married. So on the way down, of course, we were on trains filled with service people. And so I took out my needle and thread, and I was sewing patches on shirts for some of the servicemen on the way down. My sister called me the USO on the train. Well, we got to Tampa, and of course the first thing I did was to call Rabbi Goldstein's brother-in-law, and I was told that he was shipped out to England the week before. So we're back to square one. And what do we do about getting a rabbi? So I said, let's look in the directory for a Jewish name. So Bess looked up somebody by the name of Cohn, and she called this man, and she said, she told him what our problem was. We needed a rabbi because we were going to get married Saturday night, the 22nd of May, which was right after the holiday. It was just before the holiday, the day before the holiday, but it was after Shabbat. And he said, he gave her the name of a rabbi. We called the rabbi. He was a lovely man. God, I wish I could think of his name. I've got it written down on the ketubah, but I can't think of it. He said, don't worry about a thing. We'll take care of everything. He said, we'll have a reception at my house. He said, all you need are a couple of witnesses. So meanwhile, my mother-in-law, who had had a history of having had strokes, had a mini stroke. I think because Bernie had called and said, I'm not sure I can come in. He said, I can't come in Saturday night. I'm not even sure I can come in Sunday. So, we were all going to have a stroke. Anyway, we had to change the plans for the wedding because my mother-in-law could not leave the hospital. Leave the hotel. We had called one of the air bases down there, and they had sent a doctor out and said that she shouldn't go out. If you want to have the wedding, have it in the room. Well, my sister and I had a big corner room in this hotel, the Tampa Terrace Hotel, which is no longer there. And so we were planning to have the wedding there, and my mother-in-law came to that room. But before that, we had to get a marriage license. So I went to the courthouse to get a marriage license on Friday, and they told me I couldn't have one without a groom. But there was a judge there said, if you come to my house when he comes in, I'll issue a marriage license to you then. So by that time, we knew that Bernie was going to be able to come in late Sunday afternoon. We were just holding up the sun. And when he finally came in, and we had to rush off to the judge's house to get the driver's license. Meanwhile, he had found, the rabbi had found a couple of Jewish boys to hold up the chuppah, and one of Bernie's friends had a couple brothers there, and they came. So he had like Gibbons and Cooperman and Shapiro holding up the chuppah. But we drove out. We took a taxi out to the judge, and he issued the license. We came back, and my sister Bess is in the lobby, and she's rushing to Bernie, and she said, "We need a wine glass." She says, "You have to go to the bar and get a wine glass." So Bernie went to the bar, and he asked the bartender if he could buy a wine glass. And the bartender says, "No, I can't sell you one." He says, "But you can order some wine and go down to the end of the bar and take the glass." So Bernie did. Well, it's not just a little wine glass, it's a stemmed wine glass. But it worked okay. I mean, he was able to break. We had this nice little ceremony in the hotel room. And then we went down to have like a wedding supper, but it was too late. We had sandwiches. But they did have dancing, and we were able to dance. And then later that night, we took a bus to Sebring overnight and started our married life in Sebring, Florida. After we were married, my parents wanted us to wire them, let them know it was all over. By that time, there was a Coast Guard auxiliary were called the SPARS, Semper Paratus, always ready, was the Coast Guard motto. So the female auxiliary was called the SPARS. So we thought we were being very clever, saying, the Air Force has landed, and the SPARS have the situation well in hand. We thought it was funny. My dad didn't. He just wanted to know that we were married. So we went to Sebring. We lived in one room in a house, all the housing we could get. I had always had grown up Orthodox and been eating kosher my whole life. But my brother-in-law, the doctor, said, you can't go on not eating any meat. I was very small. I was under 100 pounds, and I guess he thought I needed the protein. So very carefully and not very quickly, I began to eat meat out. It wasn't easy to do, but I grew to like it. We were in Sebring for about a month, I guess, maybe a little over a month. And then we were transferred all the way up to the state of Washington. We had a delay en route in Nebraska for a number of days. And in Washington, my husband got his crew together, and from there he went to England. He signed his name responsible for a $100,000 aircraft, which is what a B-17 cost in those days, and he flew it to England. He was there for probably 9 or 10 months, I think. He was there during the air war over Germany and France, and flew his 25 missions, came home as a captain before D-Day. And a year after he got home, our oldest son was born.
Tell me a little bit about your husband, his family background.
Okay. Bernie Greenberger's mother was Bessie Gretz, and the Gretz family was a family of 12 from Omaha. His grandfather worked at Brandeis store, and his son Leon, who was Saul Gretz's father, son Solomon, a lot of daughters, Hannah Eisenstadt. I think she might have been the only one who still lived in Omaha. But Bernie was the third child of 4. His father, Sam Greenberger, came here from Hungary when he was 17 years old, and he had been apprenticed as a tinsmith. So when he came to this country, that was the kind of work he did. And he came to, I don't know what, he might have come to Omaha because his sister was Annie Berkowitz, whose husband, Nazi Berkowitz, was a furrier, a famous furrier in Omaha. Everybody knew him. And that might be why he came to Omaha. And a brother, oh God, I can't even think of his brother's name, who was a tailor, and he also came to Grand Island after my father-in-law did, and opened a menswear store, Greenberg's, which was in business up until 2 or 3 years ago. Sam Greenberg, as I say, was a tinsmith, and had come to Grand Island, and then we surmised that when they were building Fort Robinson in the northwestern part of the state, that they needed workers, and so he went to Crawford, Nebraska, and that's where he lived for a long time. He was a tinsmith there, and one time when we were traveling in northwest Nebraska, and we wanted to find, so we never asked too many questions. Nobody did in those days. No one asked their parents. He did say that he owned a Nickelodeon theater that operated on Saturday nights, and he used to lose everything that he made during the week on Saturday night. So anyway, we went to Crawford, and we went into the newspaper office to see if they had any archives there. They didn't, but they said that they were at Fort Robinson. So when we were there, we went into the archive building, and we got the newspaper, the microfilms, from about 1906 or 7 to 1910, and we started rolling, and for a long time it was nothing. We thought maybe there wasn't anything there, and then all of a sudden we see this boxed ad, a very tasteful printed boxed ad that said Greenberger and Cunningham, I think. Greenberger and Cunningham, tinsmiths. And we both started to cry. And then we kept going through and finding lots of little news items, like Sam Greenberger was home with the flu, or Sam Greenberger went to St. Louis on a buying trip. They had no facilities for printing them there, but sometime later I went to Lincoln, Nebraska to the Historical Society, and I printed all those out. I think the Jewish Historical Society has copies of them. But that was a wonderful thing to find, and we learned so much more about him. But they called it the Ruby Electric Theater was a Nickelodeon, and some of the attractions they had would be a whistler, things like that. Of course, by the time we were there was no one there who had known him, but someone did point out a shop that they thought had been their shop. Let's see, Bernie grew up in Grand Island. He was a very good student. He had brother Henry, a sister Sarah, and a sister Shirley. So for a while there were 2 Shirley Greenbergers. He was a very good student, graduated from high school, did not go to college. His brother went to college, but he was not able to. It was the time when his parents were both very, very ill and had enormous hospital and doctor bills, and that's where all their money went. But his brother Henry did get a degree from the University of Nebraska. The sisters didn't go to college either. Bernie worked for a while for his uncle, Max Greenberger, at the Greenberg's menswear store. He works for him for a long time. And actually his uncle said, Bernie, you don't have to go to college, you can always work here. But that wasn't the case. He didn't work there very long. It was not the kind of work he wanted to do. We got home from, what was he doing? I don't remember exactly what he was doing when he went into the service. But when he finally got out of the service, we went to California, and he worked for a clothing manufacturer in the office. And we were there for maybe a year and a half, and he got a call from a family friend in Grand Island, Mo Shapiro, who owned 2 ladies' ready-to-wear stores. And he wanted Bernie to come back and be manager of one. And of course, Bernie was delighted too. He was a small town boy, having been born and raised in Grand Island. He really wasn't crazy about California. And by that time, we had our oldest son John, who had been born while he was still in the service when he came back from England. And so we packed up John and everything we owned and came back to Nebraska. It was in 1947, and I lived in Grand Island for 46 years until he died. And eventually, when Mo Shapiro died, we bought the 2 stores, and we operated both of them until early in the 80s when the malls, my 4-letter word, the malls came to Grand Island, and we decided we would close one store and just keep one open, which was the best thing we ever did. And we were able to put all 4 boys through college, the good colleges, which was our goal. After we closed one store and we went to the other store, I began doing a little more work in the store, some of the book work. My husband taught me how to be a bookkeeper, taught me how to think like a bookkeeper. But before that, I used to do a lot of fashion shows for every PTA, every organization, everywhere. And that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. I have to tell you, one time, a friend of mine who was a member of the Baha'i faith called me and said, would you come and talk to one of our meetings? We have some questions we'd like to have answered about Judaism. And I said, sure. So he gave me these questions, and I sent them to Rabbi Kripke. I said, I really don't know how to answer these as well as you would be able to. Please let me know what to say. And he filled out these questions. So I went to this meeting, and I told them everything they wanted to know from their questions. Well, in a small town, anything happens, it's in the paper. And so there was this little thing that I had spoken to this Baha'i group about Judaism. Well, I got calls from all over, from every church, every organization, little towns around. And so I kind of fleshed out that original speech. My sisters called me the Rebbitzin. And I spoke to all these different groups, and I was astonished at the questions they asked me. They knew nothing about Judaism. One person even said, but you are Christian, and was appalled when I told her I wasn't. Some of them would ask me questions about some of the blood, some of the blood rituals that they had heard about that really made me sad. There was no way that I could convince them that those were not true. I did that for a long, long time. And then one of my sons started doing it, did it a few times for me, which I appreciated. All this time, my husband was busy working and being on the board of this and president of that, and both of us doing a lot of community service work and taking time off to play golf when we needed to. It was a pretty good life. It wasn't a fulfilled life for me because I was a kind of a creative person. I did belong to the Grand Island Sketch Club and did a lot of painting, but there wasn't the stimulation there that Grand Island is not a college town. But I lived there with my husband. I loved my husband, and I stayed there with him. And we lived there after he retired because at that time his health had begun to fail. He was still playing golf with his boyhood friends. He was playing bridge with his boyhood friends, and there was no way that I would ever want to take him away from that. And
what was the name of the stores?
One was the Vogue, and one was the Wardrobe. The Vogue now is a photographic studio. The Wardrobe is a stained glass studio. Downtown Grand Island is one of the sad statistics of when malls come to a city. Almost every retail establishment either closed down or if they had the capital to move out to the mall, they did that. We were not in a position to move to the mall. We didn't want to. We wanted to be, my husband wanted to be his own boss. You know, he didn't want to be told how to advertise, when to advertise. He didn't want to give them 10% or whatever percentage it was off the top of our income. So we stayed downtown, and we did have a very loyal following. And we closed the last store in 1991, and my husband had a few months before had a quintuple bypass operation, and he was ready to retire. He wanted to, and we stayed in Grand Island. We played a lot of golf. We had a lot of fun, just the two of us. We went fishing a lot. It was an big empty house.
I want to hear about your sons.
Okay, I love to talk about my sons. My oldest son, John, very handsome young man. He was very good in school, of course, especially grade school. The teachers all loved him. Did very well in high school. He worked some summers at the newspaper, their advertising department, and he knew very early on that he wanted to be in advertising. Between his junior and senior years, he took the summer course at Northwestern University called the Cherub course, and I think he did it in the journalism department, and it was a wonderful experience for him. He loved it, and he decided that's where he wanted to go to college. So when he graduated, he went to Northwestern. Jeff was 4 years younger than John because we wanted to have our children spaced 3 years apart. And I did become pregnant in order to have a child 3 years later. The child was born at 6.5 months, but did not survive. Was born alive, but did not survive. It was what they called placenta previa. Never happened again, thank God. But it was another boy, so I figured at that time that we were probably destined to have all boys. But a year after that, Jeff was born. Jeff was a delightful child. While John was kind of a sober child, Jeff was smiling all the time, laughing. I used to do things to make him laugh because he had this raucous laugh when he was a baby. He was also a very good student. They all were good students. When he graduated from high school, I think he was vice president of the graduating class. He also went to Northwestern. He also was a cherub between his junior and senior years. He also went to Northwestern. John and Jeff both went to Medill School of Journalism. Dan was also a good student. When he was in high school, he lettered in 3 minor sports, which his other brothers didn't. He was editor of the newspaper, which his other brothers weren't. And he also went to Northwestern. We went to Arts and Sciences, not journalism school. He was there for 2 years, and he said, it's just too cold here. I'd rather go to California. And so he was admitted to University of California at Santa Barbara, which he loved. He loved it there. He was a resident assistant. He stayed there with the summer between his junior and senior years and declared his residency. He stayed with relatives in Los Angeles, and so actually his college years were nothing compared to what they were at Northwestern, but he got a good education there. Matt was kind of the maverick of the family. He was shorter than all the rest, and very, very bright, an extremely bright kid. He was a threat to some of his teachers because he asked such questions that they could not answer. But he was a merit scholar, and he also went to the University of California at Santa Barbara. He liked that kind of life. Okay, John when John graduated from Northwestern, the summer that he graduated, he became a counselor at the chair program at Northwestern, and got a stipend to go to graduate school there. He got his master's degree in advertising at Northwestern. He had met a nice Jewish girl at Northwestern, and that was one of the reasons we wanted them to go to a school with the Jewish enrollment. They were engaged, and in 1968 they were married. By that time, John was working for an advertising agency in New York. Started with one that he really wasn't crazy about, and then got a job with BBDO, which he held for many, many, many years. He was very successful advertising man, creative director, has a lot of awards with his commercials. It was a thrill to see his commercials on television. Of course, he had to move to New York to be there, which is okay. We really didn't want them to come back to Grand Island. Jeff graduated from Northwestern and met his pretty Jewish wife there. They were married very young. I think they were married when they a year before they graduated from college. While he was in college, it was during the Vietnam War, John was exempt because of his eyesight. He was wearing contacts at the time, and he failed the eye test for some reason. Jeff was number 2 on the draft. Remember when they had that not the draft, whatever they called it, the lottery, number 2, and he didn't want to go to Vietnam. He was at Northwestern, and my brother-in-law, Morris Brodke, during World War II, had been the examining physician for the Coast Guard, and so we suggested that he go for the Coast Guard Reserve. It was so we suggested that Jeff go try out for the Coast Guard Reserve. So he went to their office, and they said, well, we'll put you on the list. He said, but we get so few calls. He said, we've got a list here, but we get so few calls for people, but we'll put you on the list. So Jeff had stayed in Chicago after school was out for Christmas vacation because he had a job, and he was working there, and they called him one day, and they said, you won't believe this. He said, we got a call for someone, and we've called all these names ahead of you, and they've all gone home. So if you want to, you can go into the reserve. So he did for, I think, 6 months. He was sent to Cape May, New Jersey, and was in the reserve for a number of years. Came back to Chicago, went to summer school to make up that quarter of that he missed, and graduated on time with his.
Continue with wife
Jeff.
Madeline.
After he graduated, Madeline's grandfather was a lovely man who had a lot of money, and he wanted them to go to graduate school. He sent them to. He didn't send them there. They were admitted to Columbia University, where Jeff got a law degree and Madeline got her master's degree in social work. Jeff came back to Chicago. He had been recruited after graduation by one of the large law firms in Chicago, the Sun and Shine, Nathan Rosenthal. It was like a law factory. Their office was in one of the very, very top floors of the Sears Tower. And Jeff worked there for a while. He realized at the time that the competition was so heavy there. They would hire about 20 new lawyers every year, and they were all fighting to become partners or associates. Jeff had a client that he worked with there, the Allstate Insurance Company, and they wanted to hire Jeff, and so he went to work for Allstate. Their campus is in Northbrook, Illinois, far from downtown, a beautiful campus, and that's where he worked. And at the time, they were doing some residential development, just a little bit across from where their campus was. This big development of beautiful, beautiful housing. And Jeff's name is on every deed of those houses, which is something that we like to think about and like to laugh about. He worked for Allstate until he decided he couldn't go any higher there, and went to work for a big real estate investment company called, at the time it was called LaSalle Partners, now it's Lang LaSalle, Jones Lang LaSalle. He worked for them for a long, long time, and they had merged with a London firm, and he felt that he would be better off at a different company, and he went to work for Deutsche Bank. That was in New York, so he kind of had a long distance job. He would come home weekends, or some weekends Madeline would go there. Then he came back to Chicago, and now he has his own consulting business. Very sweet boy. Dan graduated from UC Santa Barbara, decided he thought he wanted to go to law school, had applied to a few on the West Coast, was accepted, was not accepted, was on waiting list at Santa Clara. At that time, John and his wife Sue had moved to Sausalito, California, and where he was working in advertising. And so Dan went up to see them. He had broken his leg playing soccer last year in college, so he was on crutches. And he went up there to stay with them for a little while. He really wasn't sure he wanted to go to law school, even wait to see if he was going to get in. And John said, Dan, you're a clever guy. Why don't I give you some assignments on writing advertising copy? And so he did that. And John was so impressed with it, he gave the little book to his agent. And his agent said, this is one of the best books I've ever seen from someone who's never been in the business. So eventually he got a job in Chicago with Leo Burnett. Worked at the Leo Burnett agency for a long time, and then was hired away by, first he worked for Foot Cone Belding, and then he was hired away by Leo Burnett. He was offered both jobs, went with Foot Cone Belding, was hired away by Leo Burnett, and then hired back by Foot Cone Belding. Did a lot of good work, and then finally left them and went to work for a small agency that was just starting up in Evanston. There was a young woman who was a principal in that agency named Sandy House, and she recognized Dan's abilities, and she said, why don't we just go into business for ourselves? So they did. It's called Greenhouse. It's a marketing and communications and advertising agency, which has grown tremendously. They have acquired other agencies. They do very good work, and I'm just so proud of them. The agency is 17 years old today. Anyway, Dan, 2 years ago, decided or found out about this course that was being offered to business people by the State University of New York at Buffalo in facilitating and creative something. Anyway, it was something that appealed to him, and he decided to enroll in it. It's a small class. I think he said there's 17 students from all over the world, and they're all business people. They're all mature business people. I went to Buffalo for 2 or 3 weeks the first summer, where they had their classes, and then coming home he had computer classes during the year. He had assignments he had to do, had to fill out. But he had learned enough that first year that he could apply that to the people that worked for him, and for other people. People had called him and said, "Will you come to talk to our business, to our association?" Went back last summer for his 2 or 3 weeks, still doing his homework now. This next spring, they have some classes in Italy. So he and his wife are going to Italy for these classes. And then next summer he'll get his master's degree. He has some kind of teaching degree right now, but he'll get his master's degree in this particular field. Does facilitating all over. He went, about a month ago, he and some of his colleagues went to the Coca-Cola plant in Savannah and did some facilitating. So, as a third son, it's wonderful that he's doing so well. He's just doing very well. Baby Matthew, he is the maverick in our life. He always said to me, Mom, don't expect me to be like my brothers. And he wasn't. When he graduated from college, he had been working at a deli while he was in school. And when he graduated, they said, well, why don't you come work for us? So I worked for them for a while. And I had nephews in Los Angeles, one nephew who owned a very successful restaurant. So he hired Matt to be one of his managers there. And Matt loved that. He just loved that kind of work. And then they had a parting of ways, and he went to work for someone else. By that time, the brothers in Chicago, were playing basketball every Sunday, and they had children, and Matt decided, no, he's missing out on too much. So he moved to Chicago and went to work for a restaurant. That's all he knew how to do. He was his degree at University of California, and he was in the College of Creative Studies. And I say his degree was in reading. It was in literature, and I don't know what he was planning to do with it. But anyway, he was working at this restaurant, and then he decided to take a writing course that was being offered at University of Chicago, and he met Julie at that writing course, and they started going with each other, and then he decided, he had to get a regular job, because she had a regular job. She had a very good job. So he decided that he would become a temp. His first temp job, they hired him, and he worked for them for a number of years until he decided he could do better. He worked for several different companies, each time going up a little bit further. And right now he's working for Motorola, and he's in their internal communications department and a few other things. And about a month ago, he made a suggestion on a certain product that they're making about how they could improve it or what they could put on it. And they fell for it immediately, and they were telling their clients about it. And one of the clients said, "It's terrific. We'll even hire the people that you need to implement this idea." So I'm very proud of Matt. He's just in a few short years, he's just done wonderfully, just wonderfully. Now I'll get back to the boys and their families. John married Sue Madway from Philadelphia, and they lived most of the time in Connecticut. Two beautiful sons, Andrew and Zach, beautiful blonde, blue-eyed kids. This is when John was working at BBDO, and this is when my husband and I were going to New York on buying trips several times a year. So we would stay with them. They had a large house in Connecticut, a big house with swimming pool and tennis courts. We'd stay with them and commute into New York. So we got to know the children pretty well, and it was a really good family. In 1980, I think it was, John and Sue bought a summer house in Nantucket. And so we were privileged to be able to go to Nantucket many, many times and spend wonderful, wonderful times there. We had family reunions there. It was just, life couldn't have been better. John's wife, Sue, was a speech therapist, and she had gotten her master's degree before the children were born. And then she decided she wanted to get her PhD, which she did through the University of Connecticut in Hartford. And then after she got her degree, she just decided she wanted to simplify her life, and she didn't want to be married any longer. So this was a real blow to us, because no divorces in our family. But they were divorced. By that time, Andrew was at American University, and Zach who was a very, very bright kid, had taken his senior high school year at University of Southern California. They decided to do that rather than to offer the college courses in high school. I mean, they knew where the money was. So the kids didn't know about it until the school year was over, and of course they were very, very upset. And as the whole family was, but it was a done deal by that time. John had gone to California at one time during probably in April or May of that year, because Sue was coming. She was living in Philadelphia. She was coming up for something. For some reason or other, was going to stay at their house but this time they lived in Weston, Connecticut. And so John decided he didn't want to be there when she was there. So he was flying to California to visit two cousins there, Greg and Jay Sadowski, who are just like brothers. My husband's sister's sons, just like brothers to these boys. And so he went to visit Greg, and Greg said, well, we're going to Palm Springs for the weekend. And so they went to Palm Springs, and one of Greg's friends says, John, I've got a girl I want you to meet. And it was love at first sight. And Mary has been the greatest addition to our family you cannot imagine. She's the kindest, most generous, most beautiful person you've ever met. We all just love her. So John is living happily ever after. Mary is the co-owner and producer of the fabulous Palm Springs Follies, and they're doing very well. Their sons, Andrew and Zach, live in Los Angeles. Andrew was just married in April to beautiful Jennifer. Andrew is after graduating from American University, he's a television film producer. Produces films for some of the television channels. I can't remember them right now. Zach graduated cum laude from USC, and he's a wizard on the computer and programming. He works for some e-company that was recently purchased by Rupert Murdoch, doing very, very well. I mean, they've each bought a house. They're just great. I love these kids. Jeff has married Madeline, who was from Winnetka. So they went back to Winnetka. That's where they lived until they moved downtown. They live on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago now. They had one son and one daughter. Sarah, named after my mother, graduated from New Trier High School and went to the Rhode Island School of Design. She's a gifted artist, a very gifted artist and photographer. That was her major. She graduated with honors from RISD, and before she graduated, she was offered a job with Klaus Oldenburg and Kocha van Bruggen, the sculptors, which she still works for them. She does archives for them. But meanwhile, her career has taken off beautifully, mostly her photography. She's in many, many shows. She's had shows in Los Angeles, in New Zealand, in Chicago. No, she hasn't had in Chicago yet. A lot of them in New York. One of her shows in New York, it was I think it was in Brooklyn. It was a branch of MoMA. And an Italian reporter was there and saw her show and interviewed her. And there was a 4-page interview with Sarah in an Italian magazine called Label, which of course we all have a copy of. But she's just doing beautifully. It's such a pleasure to know that her career is doing so well. Her brother Elliot was a graduate of Yale, and he is in his second year in Japan teaching English. He really didn't know what he wanted to do when he graduated, and this is what he chose to do, and he loves it there. He's coming home in this summer, and he'll decide then what he really wants to do. He is a an actor. He was Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof in high school, among many, many other plays. He's a very good actor. He has a beautiful voice. He was in one of the glee clubs at Yale. There are a lot of things he could do, but he doesn't know yet what he wants to. Dan married Beth Schwarzkopf, who had a son, Lucas, when they were married. Lucas was 4 years old when they were married, and Dan adopted him immediately. Beth is a nurse. She's an RN. I worked until their first child was born. She worked while Lucas was small. They have Maggie, who was born the day before my birthday, of course, many, many years later. Maggie is a graduate of University of Vermont, where she was. She also did an internship in social work at a teen center, and after she graduated, they hired her for a year. And she came back to Chicago, and for a couple of years, she really didn't know what she wanted to do. She had been working since the age of 16 or so at a very upscale jeans store, and they wanted her back, so she was working there for a while. She's like her Aunt Sophia. She was very good in merchandising and selling, and about a year ago or so, she decided she wanted to go back into social work, and she's working in a school in Deerfield. They live in Highland Park. Deerfield is just the village right next to it. She works at a private school for problem children, and she's now seriously considering going back to college to get a graduate degree in social work. Little sister Ivy, beautiful, beautiful girl. Both of them are. Ivy graduated from the University of Vermont, University of Indiana, last June. In high school, she was on the track team. She was a high jumper, very good at it. But she graduated from Indiana, and she had taken a practice teaching job in New Zealand for 4 or 5 weeks, or 6 weeks, I think it was, and that was that. Those are credits toward her master's degree. Her whole family went down there to visit her before she left, and they spent 3 weeks touring New Zealand. Well, she's back now, and she's teaching in Rogers Park. She has a class of 5th and 6th graders. She loves it. Matt and Julie tried for years to have children. They could not. And 7 years ago, they decided they were going to adopt. And colleague, and she worked for Leo Malamed, who was a broker at the Mercantile Exchange. She worked for him, and one of her colleagues there said that her husband had a friend who had gone to high school with him, who was pregnant and didn't want to keep her baby. So they got in touch. Julie got in touch with her and with an adoption lawyer, and eventually the babies were born. They discovered she was carrying twins. They were born on May 20th, which is Dan's birthday, a boy and a girl, and they are the lights of our life. They're 7 years old now, and they are absolutely delightful. They have all these doting aunts and uncles and cousins who are crazy about them. They are such wonderful children, and they are so lucky to have us, and we are so lucky to have them. Bernie. He inherited bad genes from his parents. Both his parents died quite young. His father was 65. His mother was barely 62. He began to have problems probably in his 50s with high blood pressure, and then later with vascular problems, and of course in his 70s with the quintuple bypass, heart bypass. His condition was deteriorating, but I was, in that state of denial that everyone is in, and I just didn't really think, I was always positive about him. There are doctors that had said, that had not said but implied that, there was nothing they could do for him, and I didn't believe it. One doctor told my oldest son that he would never, that his father would never live to collect Social Security. I didn't believe that. One time when we came into Omaha to have, hoping to have carotid arteries cleaned out, they were not able to do it because he had a bad reaction to the arteriogram. And the vascular doctor then was, and I have it on tape because I asked him if he would mind if I taped it, and he said no. As much as said, there's nothing I can do, just go home and eat whatever you want and do whatever you want. I didn't believe him. My own brother-in-law didn't think that he was going to live very long. I didn't believe him. And he didn't. My husband lived much longer than the doctors had predicted. Even the doctor that our dear friend in Grand Island, Stan Navity, was surprised at how long my husband lived. But as I say, his health was deteriorating, and I was not accepting it. Came to a point where it was hard for him to play golf anymore. He had another condition which they called arterial Parkinson's, which was caused by hardening of the arteries. His balance was bad. He had trouble on steps, and he couldn't play golf the way he used to. He'd been a 12 handicap golfer when he was younger. He just couldn't play golf the way he used to, and it bothered him when we'd go out to play and I would beat him. But I wanted him to go out because I thought the company was good for him. I thought it was good for him to be out with his friends. But one of them said to me one day, "Shirley, don't make him go out anymore. It's just too hard on him." So I didn't. He didn't go out. He didn't play golf anymore after many, many, many years of playing golf. After his heart surgery, he went to rehab 4 days a week, the YMCA, religiously. And I would go with him. I'd walk laps while he was doing what he had to do. And we had our 50th anniversary in May of 1993. And we didn't have our party until August. And I think it was because everyone couldn't come in May. We had it in August. We had it early in August, this big party at our country club. And then a couple weeks later, we were going to Chicago for Maggie's bat mitzvah. And we drove to Chicago, attended Friday night. Saturday, he wasn't feeling very well. He said, I think I've got the flu. So whatever we were doing on Saturday, I don't remember exactly what it was. I did alone, and he stayed in bed. Sunday morning, we were going to have a brunch somewhere, someone's house. And he thought he could get up. And started to get dressed, and he had the chills. But luckily the boys were still. John was still there from Connecticut. We were staying with Jeff and Madeline, and I called the boys and I said, Dad's not feeling very well at all. I think he ought to go to the hospital. So they called the ambulance. They took him to the hospital, and I followed him in the car. And turned out he had a gallbladder infection. That's what was causing all that. It was a terrible infection. He had a temperature of way over 100 degrees. They couldn't operate on him until the infection had subsided. And so he was in the hospital for a week while they worked on him. Delirious some of the times, but most of the time he was all right. When it came time for the surgery, they had to take him off of Coumadin because he was on Coumadin because of the carotid. He had been going to see the doctor every month for pro time to see what the blood clotting was like. But they had to take him off the Coumadin for the surgery. And the doctors all said he was fine for it. He had the surgery. The anesthesiologist came out and told me he came through it just fine. They had him in the ICU. And it was the day that he was ready to be transferred to another room, to a regular room. And I was there in the morning, and Matt was there. He'd come over after playing basketball with the brothers. And I was wearing a suit that I had made, and had a skirt that had buttons all the way down the side. And Matt said, "Mom, that's a good-looking suit. Did you make it?" And I said, "Yeah, I made it." And Bernie said, "Yes, and I helped her." He said, "I told her where to put the buttons, opposite the buttonholes." It was the last joke he ever told. They came to take him to put him in another room, and I said, "Okay, I'll be back up. I have to go down and get something to eat. I hadn't eaten all day." I went down to the cafeteria. Was there maybe for 10 or 15 minutes. I came back upstairs, and I see doctors running in and out of his room. And while I was gone, he had a stroke. Took one side of him. He couldn't talk. He was trying desperately to say something. He was grinning. He knew he couldn't say anything. So they had to take him back into ICU. By the time they got him back there, he had always told me, he said, "I'm not afraid of dying, I'm afraid of not dying." And when they took him back to the ICU, they had called a neurologist in who tried to get him to respond to him, screaming at him. It just John, just couldn't stand what this doctor was doing. But anyway, the doctor that we had for him said, "You have three alternatives. One, to shut everything off right away. One, to wait a couple of days, and one, to just let nature take its course, or to keep him on life support until something happened." And so we talked it over, and we decided to take number two. Let's wait a couple of days, because there was a friend of ours back home who the doctors had given up hope on, and had called all the family together, who lived another 5 years, who came to and lived another 5 years. And I thought, this could possibly happen to Bernie. I'm not going to let that chance go by in case it would happen. So he was at the Evanston Hospital, and they couldn't have been nicer. All the boys were there. All the wives were there. We were cuddled. We couldn't wait in the waiting room. It was too small. We were in the hall. They tolerated all of that. They were so nice. They gave me tickets to use in the parking garage, so I wouldn't have to pay. The medical students and the interns came by when they were off duty to see how he was, how we were doing. And finally, the time came that we decided, we knew he wasn't going to be well. And I went in there and I said, this is breaking our heart. We can't do this, but we have to. And so they put him in another room, and there again they tolerated all of us. All the grandchildren came. Every single one of our family was there, and every single one of us got to go in and say goodbye to him alone. After about the second night that he was there, I stayed there overnight with him. The next day we had one of the rabbis come and do a little service for us. And he died the second day after he was in there. He died at about noon. They gave him a morphine drip, and he died very peacefully. He looked so handsome on the table. And I miss him. I want to end this by saying how much I love all of you. You know that I tell you that every day of your life and every day of my life. And you know what your father thought of you. He always said that the greatest thing that ever happened to him was that he raised 4 boys who loved one another. And I feel the same way. And I love you all for loving your wives and your children, the same way that we loved you. And I think I am blessed to be leaving this kind of a legacy someday.